Welcome, everyone, to the episode 4 of the Comedy.law podcast. I'm Max Langley, and here with me, as always, are Shirelle and Keith. Today, we've got a special guest, Jeremy Medeiros with Liberty Mutual. Jeremy is famous enough for having invented the LiMu emu, and Doug. So we're going to ask him a few questions about his experience with marketing, but more importantly, with being a surety claim handler. So, Jeremy, how are you today?
Oh, doing pretty good, Max. Thanks. Good to be here.
Where are you at right now?
I am at the Liberty Plano office.
And I saw on my LinkedIn feed, I don't know if you were there when it happened, but Doug actually came to the Liberty Plano office like a few weeks ago, right?
I'm pretty sad we don't have Doug. Where's Doug?
A lot of people got pictures with Doug. Unfortunately, I was traveling that day.
You have to travel a lot for payment and performance bond claim handling, right?
So I miss Doug, and lots of people here got pictures with him. So hopefully one day I'll be able to get one.
So, Jeremy, today we've got Shirelle with us, and she's a relatively new claim handler, especially on payment performance bonds. So I think she might have a couple of questions for you, especially on P&P. Would you mind helping her out a little bit?
Yeah, that's pretty much all I know, Max.
Jeremy says I can teach you, Shirelle, all I know, but I can't understand it for you.
Yeah, that's what Keith said.
Where did you work before Liberty, Jeremy?
I worked for St. Paul and then Travelers for a couple years.
So the two biggest sureties, you got a pretty unique situation. You've done P&P bonds for the two biggest sureties, right?
Those are the only two employers, so 20 plus years now. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Meanwhile, Shirelle is just like trying to find the best opportunity. So she's not married to anybody right now. You know, she's just whoever will give her the best payment performance bond claim handling. She's like, I'll go there.
I wouldn't say that, but I'm definitely open. I would love to, hear Jeremy some of your thoughts, or even if you have any advice in reference to payment and performance bond claim handling practices. So I'm happy to hear what you got to say about that.
Well, I'm happy to talk about it. Whatever you guys want to ask me.
What treatises or books or manuals do you look at, Jeremy? Are there any that you look at, or what do you do there?
So the payment and performance bond manuals are probably what I would go to most, especially early in my career. Shirelle, I would say, obviously, when you're dealing with a state you haven't seen before, that payment bond manual is very good, right, with respect to giving you a general outline on notice, on what's covered, on limitations period. I mean,
and that's the one from the ABA, the big blue one, right?
Yeah, that thing is gold. And, as you get more experience, you'll pick up on the similarities and the differences between different states, but I still find myself referring to that. Also, as you develop your network of attorneys you have relationships with, like you do with Keith and Max, it's always great to follow up with someone you know and trust. Like if you have some questions about Texas, just to reach out to these folks to get a second opinion, because things change. The version of those manuals I have isn't always the most current. So you want to make sure that nothing has changed significantly. Things like bad faith have been changing in some states, so it's not going to be 100% current. So there's some important things it's nice to have trusted advisors on in each state just to check in on if you're conducting an investigation on your own without utilization of outside counsel.
So Jeremy, I want to talk with you a little bit about your day, what you do every day in walking and dealing with people who are not necessarily happy, right? I mean, you have obligees and the project has an issue or a problem or is not completed, and you have claimants on the payment bond, meaning people who have not been paid. Tell us about your daily walk. What do you do every day?
Yeah, and when you talk about the problem, usually there's a problem when there's a disconnect between you're talking about payment bond claimants and obligees, but you've got the principal, running interference in the middle, And sometimes their objectives or their view of the world is similar to ours, as in a couple cases that I've had with you two big ones over the last 10 years that we presented on at National Bond Claims. We were very arm in arm with our principal and pretty much saw the world in the same way as far as those cases, which made it pretty easy. But, you know, you deal with cases, and I've got some now in which the principal's view of the world is different. So the surety's really in a role of independently investigating and making its own determination, not only on what the bond liability may or may not be, but what's the best way to mitigate any potential exposure. And to do that, you know, there's sometimes a really big hump you've got to get over with a principal where, and at Liberty, we try to be very proactive where we see exposure and problems and to get on top of them, not only just to meet our obligations under the bond, which is our first priority, but also to mitigate our loss. And when we see a basket of loss out there, we are going to jump out and try to mitigate it. Now you've got a principal to deal with who, you know, is going to be part of hopefully the solution, right? So you've got negotiations going on and discussions with the principal, but then also with the obligee. So you've sort of got to broker an overall global solution to how to handle a basket of problems. And, you know, within that, you've got different owners sometimes with different needs, projects in different states, different durations, some close to complete, some not started. So our approach, even with the same principle, is going to change project by project. So it can become a lot to manage, and on something that gets that big, you know, relying on our business partners, our outside engineers, our inside engineers. At Liberty, we're very fortunate to have an extremely talented financial group of accountants.
Well, you've hit us with like a ton of stuff.
Okay.
There's so much to talk about. Let me just get you one thing to focus on the obligee. What is an obligee, and what do you do when you talk with them?
Yeah, so almost always an obligee is going to approach us first if there's a problem with some sort of communication with some level of
well, tell me what is an obligee?
an obligee is the owner of the project. That's the person that we owe our obligation to under the terms and conditions of the performance bond, which is going to incorporate the prime contract or the subcontract, whatever we're bonding. So obligee is the owner of the job. They're the stakeholder of the project. They are going to reach out to the surety if something's not going the way they want it to on the project. And
the rumble letters, right?
It can be a rumble letter, or it can be just a straight, we're terminating the principal today, you know, and sometimes they may have the right to do that. Sometimes they might not. It's important. You know, the first thing that we're always do is pull out the bond, look at the terms and conditions of the bond, as well as look at the prime contract or the subcontract to see what steps the obligee's got to go through if they want to properly terminate and default the
Well, Shirelle, Jeremy calls them rumble letters, but it's a letter that comes from the owner, the obligee, that says, hey, your principal, the contractor that you bonded, is not doing what I want them to do when I want them to do it. Do you get those, Shirelle, and what do you do with those?
I think she went out. There she is. Shirelle, do you ever get those FLAC letters or rumble letters in your daily practice, or have you not gotten to that point of handling the P&P bonds yet?
Haven't gotten to that point just yet.
Right.
Okay. Well, Jeremy, focus on that and tell me what is in your world, what is a rumble letter, and what, if anything, do you do when you get a rumble letter?
Yeah, so we call them at Liberty either rumble letters or FLAC letters. And it's a letter from the owner that's basically expressing some dissatisfaction with something that's going on in the project, whether this thing is looking like it's going a little late, we've missed some some deadlines, or we're getting notifications from trades that they're not getting paid. They're not defaulting the principal. They're not talking about terminating the principal. They're just alerting us to some issues that they've got with the contractor or subcontractor. So we will respond with a letter basically setting forth that it's our understanding that you're not happy, but it's also our understanding that you are not invoking the performance bond at this time. And our principal, we will contact our principal with respect to your concerns, and they will address them. And we will send that letter to them, inviting them to let us know if we misunderstand what they're trying to tell us. But what we will inevitably do is just talk to the principal and say, hey, we got this letter, what's going on, and get an explanation. Got one of these last week from a very good contractor of ours relating to a public entity up in North Texas. And, you know, this owner sent us a lot of documentation regarding some warrant defective work and warranty items, but we've got a great contractor who said, you know, do I need to respond to your letter, Jeremy? I've got a meeting with them next Wednesday, right? We're going to go.
That is proactive. Wow. Even your principal's being proactive.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a very good account, and I can afford them a lot of slack, right? I trust them. I've been through it with them before. I've gotten flack letters on them before. They're going to sit with the owner, and you know, I bet you I never hear from it again. You know, but sometimes, but the flack letters are important because we want to make sure it's sort of a time to check in with the account, check in with underwriting, right? Say, hey, got this, not concerned about it, but is there anything we need to be worried about more globally with this?
So it could kind of be like
Ever come a time, Jeremy, when you pick up the phone and call the obligee and say, hey, you've now sent 4 or 5 Rumble letters. What's going on?
So it's possible, although getting into 4 or 5, what I'll generally do is if I'm getting satisfactory responses from my principal with respect to, like I did this week on the one where they're setting a meeting with the owner, I'll just lay off it pretty much. If they follow up, I'll send them an email and say, yeah, it's my understanding that the principal's meeting with you next Wednesday to address these alleged deficiencies. Please let me know if there's any outstanding issues after that meeting is held, or there's going to be a few weeks of performance, maybe even 6 weeks. And, you know, if I'm not concerned, right, like in this case, I'm not concerned, I've got a good principal, then basically just letting the owner know, you know, we trust the process of what's going on right now. The bond is here, right? It's going to be here, right? And get back to me and let me know if you think that that's something that's going to need to be pursued, right? And they will, right? I mean, if commitments, and what happens a lot, right? The contractor will go meet with them, make commitments, and the commitments aren't met. Like, I don't anticipate that in this case, but if you've got a problem where the commitments aren't met, I can almost assure you it's because they're having some financial solvency issues, right? They're acknowledging that there's problems on the project, right? They might have subs that need to get paid. They can't get out to do the punch list work. They might not have enough money to perform the work within their scope, right? So it's a money issue, which is why I said a couple minutes ago, it's important. I will call underwriting when something like this comes in, because say, hey, is this potentially something that's symptomatic of something larger that you guys have been tracking on the financial side of this account over the last year or two? So like, for example, the one I've talked about today, I had received another one about 6 months ago on the same one. And the first thing I did was talk to the underwriter who's in my office in Plano.
So there shouldn't be a big wall between underwriting and claims, right? Underwriting and claims should work together.
No, they have to. And I went over and talked to her. She's in my office, and I brought up the name of the account. She's like, great account, right? Great account. Like, they are going to, not worried about them at all. They're in a great financial position. We can trust what they say. So I didn't even told her 2 months later, yeah, that thing we talked about went away, just like you thought it would. Got another one in, right? Like I said, a couple weeks ago, didn't even need to talk to her again because I know what I'm getting, right? But sometimes you might go over to the underwriter and talk to them, and they could say, yeah, there's been some problems with their billings. They're not getting paid on this one job. We're sort of looking at them on a bond by bond basis as far as what we're going to continue writing for these folks. Please let us know what's going on with this job, and please look into it carefully, right? And then maybe it's not just a little something that went wrong. And the concern there is this flak letter we got, this rumble letter, is it part of something bigger?
Is it the tip of the iceberg, right?
Yeah.
That's what you're looking at. You're looking underneath the carriage. You're saying, oh, is there more here? And it's hard because a performance bond and a payment bond claim, it's kind of like you're in darkness, right? It's kind of like you're in complete darkness and you have a flashlight and you can kind of see a little bit, right?
Yeah.
But you can't see all of it. You can only see pieces.
Yeah. And, Max, that makes me think of something that's been on my mind a lot lately, and that's the difference in the different states that we work in, that I work in, right? So I talked to an agent this week who was looking for some advice on a conditional release that their contractor's been getting burned in Texas on second tier suppliers. And they're like, what can we do? I'm like, really, short of doing joint checks, right? They're like, we're even getting conditional releases back, but the payments aren't going out. I'm like, you're still going to be liable, right? I mean, short of doing a joint check and knowing that money's going to the second tier, it's a risk. You can have your subs get bonded, but they don't like that because it costs money, and it's so. But you talk about going under the hood, Max. In Texas, we are going to know, right? Because they're going to have to notify us every month if we have people not getting paid. I'm in Missouri now on something that's pretty big. They don't have to file anything. In fact, they have 10 years, arguably more.
That's crazy.
You can get a payment bond claim on a project for work that was performed 9.5 years ago that you've heard nothing on.
And you can't look under the hood on that one.
No, and we didn't. And in this case, we didn't have an opportunity to, for that very reason. Yeah. Right? I mean, we hit an iceberg, right? But we had no warning, none. No payment bond claims, because in Texas, a contractor, subs and suppliers are going to understand they have to file notice every month, no matter how good the contractor is, to preserve their rights, right? In Missouri,
and Jeremy, you talked about notice and why that's important, and there are real people involved. I want to go back to rumble letters and your discussion about rumble letters. And it's kind of like a ruler where a rumble letter is on one end, the other end is termination. Tell me the difference and why is it so important to have termination?
Well, you know about this better than I do. We've been through this together on multiple occasions, right? Talking about this very thing. And, if the obligee is going to be seeking recourse from the surety under the performance bond, they have obligations, right? They have first obligations that they've got to meet in their contract with the principal. Then they've got obligations that they've got to meet with respect to the terms and conditions of the bond. So the easy ones that we always talk about, right, are proper default, proper termination of the principal, and then complying with whatever the bond sets forth they've got to do, whether it's request a meeting, in order to sort of tap the performance bond to get the surety involved. And why that's kind of even more important than just making sure the obligee does what they're supposed to do, a surety is not in a position where it can interfere with an active contract between an owner and a general contractor, right? I mean, we're third party. We can't just come in and muck around without the proper steps being followed to allow us to do what we need to do.
So what I'm hearing, Jeremy, from you is that when you get rumble letters, which are flak letters or complaints, but short of termination, you can get involved, you can talk to people, you can investigate, but until an active termination occurs, at least in Texas, you're not really in a position to go out there to the project and do things.
Yeah. I mean, so Under the indemnity agreement, of course, we've got a lot of rights, which will let us sort of like look under the hood, like Max talked about to a degree. Yeah, we can get an engineer out there to look at the project maybe. We certainly can't direct anybody to do anything. We certainly can't take any action that's going to be construed as interfering with what's going on between the owner and the GC. We can do some poking, right? Do some investigating. Principals have obligations to us to provide us with information that we request. But, then you're running into cooperation, things along those lines. And sometimes that's easy, sometimes that's hard.
It's like there can only be one captain of the ship, right? I mean, that's the principle you're talking about, is that if there tries to be two captains, which is both the principal and the surety, then the ship is going to flounder. It's going to have problems.
So,
Yes.
Jeremy, just a question. When you're in that space where you can't really do anything because the obligee has not declared default or hasn't terminated the principal, what kind of poking and prodding do you do? What kind of questions do you ask? What kind of information do you try to gather from the principal?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I would say that the way that I approach that is, how big of a problem is this, first of all? Because looking under the hood, as we're talking about, right, that costs money, right? It can cost a lot of money. And you're fine in your career, for all people that do what we do, right? We're going to be busy to different levels at different times. Sometimes you're going to be able to do a whole bunch of stuff on your own because, you know what, I got time. Sometimes if you've got an account that there's concerns, if you look at how much open work they've got and it's concerning, right? It's a lot of work. If something goes wrong, this could be costly. We will do what's called the books and records review, which we can do anytime we want to under the indemnity agreement. But, again, at minimum, I'm taking up the time of my in-house engineers and in-house accountants to have to go take their time, travel, cost, expense, time. But sometimes I'm having to hire outside. And, if our internal staffing is too busy, which they are often, we have to pay outside engineers and accountants, and we'll go do that books and records review, which is really very diagnostic, and it's going to cost a little bit of money. Now, sometimes that $10,000 might be a drop in the bucket compared to what your overall exposure may or may not be, but sometimes that's a lot of money for, 10, 15,000 on what you really think your risk is. So you got to just kind of take it case by case.
Well, Jeremy, you remind me of a duck, swimming on the pond. I mean, there's nothing above the surface, but below the surface, the feet are really moving. So there's a whole lot of information that you may be gathering that people like the obligee don't necessarily know about. But I take it that what you're doing is trying to get information so you can know where to devote your resources.
Yeah, I mean, question one is, how healthy is this company? I guess question two is, what's their competency in our trust on the open
Let's
web?
talk about how financially healthy is this company. Why is that important to you, and what do you do with that information?
Well, it's sort of everything, Keith, because if a company is not financially healthy, that means that not only are the problems that are surfacing on the project that brought us into this conversation in the first place almost certainly a cause of maybe liquidity issues or worse, but this is a ship that may be crashing sometime soon because
Well,
you're
on that issue, Jeremy, I mean, you have a right to request collateral from the principal, the contractor that you bonded. If you find that there's a problem financially, it does it encourage you to ask for financial security collateral?
in some cases it can. The difficulty is, if we've got a big bonded whip of work, our first priority is going to be seeing that our bonded projects are completed, because there's a lot more money to be lost in not having our bonded WIP completed than there is to be gained by squeezing some pennies out of my indemnitor who's already, at the helm of a ship that's in financial trouble. Now, if it's an account where we've got a WIP of maybe, let's say, $20 million worth of work, and they're a few million dollars upside down, but maybe if this individual is worth $50 million, well, yeah, that's something that money can solve, right? But that's usually not the case, right? Usually we might be looking in a situation where your exposure on the performance side is, 8 figures plus, right? And maybe they're worth a couple $1,000,000. That couple $1,000,000 isn't going to solve this problem necessarily. Of course, we're going to look to be indemnified, but just getting $1,000,000 out of this person to put in the bank isn't going to solve our problem, right? I mean, we got to get these projects finished. So really, at that point, Keith, the decision needs to be made: is cooperation from the principal worth more to us than their collateral at this point in time, or is the collateral more important than the cooperation we need from the principal to get this bonded work finished?
And I think making that decision is something that Liberty and you do very, very well, Jeremy, is making the collateral decision up front and the indemnity decision up front, and trying to handle it contemporaneously if that makes sense. But if it doesn't make sense to handle it contemporaneously, you do it pretty quick right on the back end. You don't wait, though. You don't wait to find out what the best answer is on the indemnity side. And a lot of sureties kind of do wait a little bit too long sometimes. But Liberty's pretty proactive about that, in my opinion.
Yeah, and we will usually try to work, if it's something where we're not just going to straight up hit for collateral and we think that, focusing on collateral and indemnity up front is in our best interest, we will roll that in to whatever. We will try to do a global agreement with the principal and the indemnitors that builds in carrots for them on indemnity for cooperation, which is what we need. But Max, you and I had a very rare case where the principal did have money to make everything okay, and they were able to put up millions to us, right? Recently, it was basically enough to solve the problem, and that's rare, right? I mean, but that was nice, right? Because we were pretty clean on that one.
Well, and what I hear you saying, Jeremy, is the classic lawyer response of "it depends." So you're weighing information and trying to get a resolution, a solution to get the job done or the payments made or whatever. Let's move and talk a little bit about the nuns. And Max, tell us about the nuns and why we're talking about nuns.
Well, they're really great people. I met them in Corpus Christi when I went to the federal courthouse, and their lawyer put them in the entire front row of the federal courthouse, a front row full of nuns. And then he got a priest. I don't know where he got the priest, because the people that lived at this project were just the nuns. The priest didn't live there, but there was a priest anyways. And
everyone should have a priest, and put the priest where he can be seen, or she can be seen.
And I couldn't win that court case right there. That was the federal court, the federal part of this case. They kicked us to arbitration, but that was a blessing in disguise for us, because arbitration turned out to be a really good venue for us to present our legal defenses to this claim. So it all starts with this bond claim that these nuns have on their church after the project is finished. I just zoomed in.
You zoomed in.
But after the project is finished, they did this bond claim, and they said, hey, we want, it was like $10 million. And we said, no, we don't think that that's what's owed, because the project's already done, substantial completion's already been reached, and you've already paid all the money to the principals. So there's no money left on the project. And so we tried our best to do those sayonara motions, and Jeremy can tell you a little bit more about what happened.
Yeah, well, we didn't write down in Galveston that day. It was not a good day. I mean, we got shut down pretty good, right?
We did.
Yeah. But So, but like you said, we ended up in arbitration, which turned out to be a good thing for us.
It was a 3-panel, right? So there were 3 arbitrators, and we did it in their church, in like the lunchroom. And it was you, me, and Ben Howell, and there were all these people in there. It was pretty crowded, and the nuns had to go first. And the arbitrators kept saying, "What do you want? What do you want?" And the counselor's like, "I'm gonna get there. I'm gonna get there." He's like, "No, tell me, what do you want? What do you want?"
Well, let me stop you right there, Max and Jeremy and Shirelle. I mean, this question of what do you want? And it's something that you think about from the very beginning and throughout. What do people want? And I call that the elevator speech. What is it that is being sought? Either a finished building, a finished project, payment. Why is money not flowing? And Jeremy talked about that a little bit. But Jeremy, with the nuns, we have heard from Max that the arbitrators, the decision makers wanted to know, what do you want? What are you doing with all this information throughout as it relates to that elevator speech?
Well, they wanted a boatload of money, right, Max? I mean,
Yeah,
they
they did.
a boatload. And the thing about it is they were offered a boatload of money.
They hit a home run at mediation.
I think it was the second or third meeting. Now, our position was we were very entrenched in our position that this was not a performance bond issue. But they did have some pretty viable insurance claims, it seemed like. And Max, I can't remember the amount. Was there up to 10 million on the table at some point in time?
There was total. It was like a little north of 10, and all they wanted when the performance bond was about 10. So they got almost 100% if you're just looking at the performance bond. Their claims against the other people were pretty small, so it's just like it aggregated to over 10 million.
They turned it down, so that's why we're in mediation with, and with the amount and controversy of 10 million plus, like Max said, you have 3 arbitrators, but very educated construction surety experienced arbitrators, were they all from Texas, Max? Because there was at least 2, right?
I think 2 were from Texas. One was from yeah.
And
well, we just got a great idea for another podcast. We can talk a whole ton about arbitration, about experience, about knowledge and decision makers, but we'll put that aside for a moment. You're focused in on your elevator speech and what you're looking to obtain. What were you looking to obtain here, Jeremy?
well, we were looking to get out of the case on summary judgment. I mean, completely.
Now, what I want to ask you is, how do you get out of the case? How do you exit stage left? And what are the facts that you have been gathering that allow you to exit?
Well, the facts here were pretty easy because, Max, how old was this project? I mean, this project
It was like 8 years old.
It was a very old project, and substantial completion had been reached years and years and years before this suit was even initiated. And then several more years went by before the arbitration. But I think, Max, was it your idea? I mean, I don't remember. It was me, you, and Nick, right, working this case?
Right.
I don't remember whose idea it was, probably yours, to get the dispositive motions put together.
Yeah, I've been reading about it, and I wanted to try it because, I read this theory, and it was all theory back then because nobody had put it into practice. We were one of the first cases to really test out the summary judgment motion in arbitration.
It sounded great to me. So I think Nick and I were certainly all for that, and we aggressively pursued it, right? And
Yeah, and I like what you did, Jeremy, with the idea that you had of putting the indemnitor on the stand and to get him to talk about indemnity near the front of our case in chief. And we did that, and it really personified the indemnitor of that it was going to be his money and not the surety's money. that would have to pay this if there was a judgment against us. I think that planted a really good seed, and it caused the arbitrators to say, wait, these guys filed this motion for summary judgment. There's an exit right there. We can let them out on
Yep.
that. And then at least 2 out of 3 of them bought in for that.
Well,
Yep.
what I think is so key is, Jeremy and Max, what you've talked about is important to everyone involved. I mean, everyone involved needs to say, hey, what are we looking for? And where are the pockets of money to solve problems if money is a solution? And here, Jeremy, you talked about insurance, an accident occurring with money from an insurance policy. And we have over on the other side, the surety and the completion of the project. And you talked about an 8-year-old project. Talk a little bit more about how that's important to the owner to see what to do here.
Well, Max, we were dealing with significant design issues here. Was that
Yeah.
that was one of the primary?
I became pretty close friends with the design person's counsel, and we tried to get them to put up enough money, and they ultimately did.
And the challenge here is that the owners, maybe this one did, generally might know that the performance bond isn't the appropriate place for them
Right.
to be doing a recovery. But the performance bond is big,
It
very
is.
big, and they can get everything they need from it. Whereas a defective design policy might be limited, one,
It's like $1 million. Yeah. They were like $1 million and then less.
and then eroding.
Yeah, and they were eroding for cost of defense, which is big time problems. CGL does not erode, but
Mhm.
CGL is a little harder to get than these E&O policies. You
Mhm.
can get the E&O policy pretty easily, at least trigger the duty to defend.
Yeah. And this was a case where it was really clear, I think, to the panel that the owner was trying to shoehorn their claims on the
Right.
bond,
Right.
which is not where they belonged. That's not where they belonged, which is why they should have accepted the settlement. Beyond that, Max, ultimately, they didn't prevail against those insurance claims for the most part in the arbitration either, right? I mean, I
Right.
think sort of a situation of greed, but I don't know what your other thoughts are on that. But
Well, what I think I hear you saying is, where are you going to focus on, or are you focusing on the design professional? Are you focusing on the insurance for accidents? Or are you focusing on the surety? And if you're spending a lot of time and energy and money and experts, and you're only focused over here on the surety, if that is totally wrong because your project is completed, maybe you should be focused more on these other areas.
yeah, and
OPM, and that's something big, Shirelle, what you do when you're going to get more and more PNP bonds. If you can get OPM, which is other people's money, if you can get that in play, then you're going to get bonuses at the end of the day.
I thought you were talking about something manufactured from a poppy plant. OPM.
No. Other people's money. We don't talk drugs in the Comedy.law podcast.
Yeah, and that's probably a subject for another podcast y'all will hold. But pursuing insurance is something that we've been very involved with, and I've been very involved with Max and Keith on that. And the high level there is informing your principal about the existence of that and how it's not recoverable versus the indemnity agreement to get them interested in pursuing it.
Yeah, that's a great idea. We should definitely talk about that. That's a rich, no pun intended, area.
Yeah, and we got to let Jeremy go, and then we can talk about what we're going to do next time after Jeremy gets out of here with his muting the screen or whatever he's going to do.
Yeah,
All right.
make like a tree and get out of here.
Thanks for coming on, Jeremy. We appreciate it a lot. That was really great.
Thank you, Jeremy.
See y'all later.
Bye. All right. Now that he's gone, jeez. Okay. So we were thinking for next one we do To Kill a Mockingbird. What do you think about that, Shirelle?
I like To Kill a Mockingbird. It was actually really good. I'm gonna
Yeah.
have to
Have
watch
you
it
read the
again.
book or just seen the movie?
No, the Cliff Notes, which is the movie.
Yeah,
Yeah. Nobody
I
reads the
spent
actual
more
book.
time reading the book. I need to watch the movie again.
I've never seen the movie because it's a black and white movie, and I was like, I see the world in different colors. I see rainbows.
I mean, black and white films are really good though. They're classics. So
Yeah,
I don't mind it.
they are. This
I
is
could,
one of the best films ever made, apparently.
well,
It's pretty good. Gregory Peck did a great job.
So we'll talk about that next time. And then the time after that, Blaze, the editor, he goes, I want to be on. So if not next week, but the week after, if you could talk about Lincoln Lawyer, I'd like to talk about that with you guys. So we'll do back-to-back movies, even though usually I don't like to do back-to-back movies. I'd rather us do, movie guest. But
okay. So who's
you
the
know.
next guest then after this?
I was thinking we were going to go with Elon Musk. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, Musk may be a little busy right now.
Yeah, he's busy fixing those
I can call him. I still put my finger up like in the olden days when you had a receiver. Nowadays, you just have a phone. So,
You just put on a speaker. You don't even put the phone to your ear anymore.
right. Yeah, I got to do that more.
All right, so I think it's $4. So we'll send you a $4 bill in the mail to reimburse you for it because we do reimbursements here on the Comedy.law podcast. We got a huge budget,
I think we should definitely get a woman on.
Yeah, I do too. Is there anybody in mind that you want to try to grab?
I was kind of thinking, I don't really know her well, but Gina Lockwood.
I can ask her. She might. I used to have an office with her. I used to have an office with her.
Yeah, there's another woman, Alana. I don't know how to say her last name, but it starts with a P. I'll look for it, and I'll just kind of throw it out there to see if she might be interested to be interviewed.
Great idea.
Icons.
Great idea.
Women in Surety. I like that.
Yeah, and it's Women's History Month. We should have had a woman on.
Oh yeah, I agree. Now every month is Women's History Month. Come on.
Women's history is U.S. history, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thus ends episode 4. And I will let's just what do you got to do? End session for all, I think, while it's uploading.
I think 98%.
You have to finish uploading, so I'm going to leave it on.
All right.
All right. Have a good day.
All right. Bye.
Right. Oh, Max,